we live in quite interesting times. First, we have orcas who are attacking boats in the Strait of Gibraltar, and we also have now sea otters who are biting surfboards. One sea otter in particular. And we're going to talk about that sea otter. That sea otter is sea otter 841 that lives in the Santa Cruz area. We're going to talk about the recent events that happened where a sea otter was found to bite a number of different surfboards and quote unquote attack or menace a surfer. Nobody got hurt, including the sea otter, which is great. But we need to talk about what's next and what we're going to go, where we're going to go from here. And I want to make sure that there's not too many bad videos that you're seeing. So anyway, we're going to talk about that on this episode of the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. Let's start the show. Hey everybody, welcome back to another exciting episode of the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Lewin. This is the podcast where you find out what's happening in the ocean, how you can speak up for the ocean, and what you can do to live for a better ocean by taking action. And today's episode is going to be quite interesting. It's all about sea otters, which is a great topic. And normally when we talk about sea otters, we talk about saving them, or we talk about sort of the cute things that they do. I mean, they are one of the cutest animals, cutest marine mammals anyway, that we are seeing in today's world. They are cute. They look like they're cuddly. However, apparently not. They are still wild animals, and they are going to do what sea otters do. They're going to eat, they're going to swim, and apparently one of them, Otter 841, is going to bite a surfboard every once in a while and make sure that the surfers do not go back on. It's an interesting conundrum. Like it's you know what, it's making headlines just like the orcas are making headlines. And a lot of people, even in the videos, when you watch the videos, people are saying, hey, you know, there are some, this is actually kind of cute. You know, you see the sea otter that jumps up on to the surfboard. The surfer comes off of the surfboard. He's interviewed later in a bunch of news segments. And you can see the otter is biting on the surfboard, is taking chunks out of it, let's just say. But it's not trying to harm the surfer. The surfer was trying to flip the surfboard and trying to get the sea otter off, but the sea otter actually did a pretty good job in some acrobatics and is able to stay on the surfboard. So there could be a variety of reasons that we're seeing this, and we're going to go into them. But first, I wanted to give a bit of a history of sort of the sea otter population on the west coast of North America. So I'm just going to pull up, and the Marine Mammal Commission is, by the way, it's celebrating its 50th anniversary, which is kind of cool. But they have a page, which I'll put in the show notes, about the sea otter. And we're just in terms of abundance and going into the history, before commercial hunting came in, which they were known for, you know, being hunted for their pelts. In the mid-1700s, estimated that 150 to 300,000 sea otters occurred in the coastal waters throughout the North Pacific, from Alaska all the way down to Baja California. Now, in 1911, hunting was prohibited under the terms of an international treaty for the protection of the North Pacific fur seals and sea otters, signed by the United States, Japan, Great Britain, they did it for Canada at the time, and Russia. But by then, there were only a few thousand otters that remained, including a small colony of about 50 otters along the coast of Central California. By the time the Marine Mammal Protection Act was enacted in 1972, the California population had grown from as few as 50 to more than 1,000 individuals, an average annual growth rate of about 5%, which is really cool to see. Now, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, the FWS, listed the southern sea otter population as threatened under the Endangered Species Act in 1977 and adopted a recovery plan for the population in 1982, which was updated in 2003. The recovery plan specifies that the species would be considered for delisting when the average population level over a 3-year period exceeds 3,090 animals. That, I assume, is when it's considered a viable population. Obviously not near the 150,000 or 300,000 that we saw, or that we estimated in the mid-1970s, but obviously a big increase compared to the 50 that we saw earlier in the 19th century. Now, at the FWS, estimated southern sea otter population in 2016 was 3,272, which is above the threshold, a record high since 1972. But in 2019, the count declined somewhat to about 3,186. Still exceeded that 3,090 number, but the potential delisting threshold for a second straight year. However, the population has continued to decline with the most recent abundance estimates of 2,962 otters in 2019. Now, no survey counts occurred during 2020. According to the 2021 stock assessment report, the observed decline reflects lower numbers of sea otters in the northern and southern portion of the mainland range, offset somewhat by continued growth of the central portion of the mainland range and the translocated population at San Nicolas Island. The declining mainland counts since 2017 could be due to increased mortality from shark bites and other causes such as harmful algal blooms and disease. So there's a number of things that have happened over that time. When you're looking at a recovered population, especially one that is on the endangered species list, the recovery is extremely important, and so many things can affect and influence that recovery. We see that with a lot of fish populations in the ocean. We see it a lot with marine mammal populations and shark populations and sea turtle populations. So it's not just for sea otters, but when a population is so small, then that increase and decrease can be sensitive to a variety of things: water quality, water pollution, coastal development, hunting, of course, getting hit by boats with other marine mammals such as manatees and the northern Atlantic whale population. There's a lot of things that can happen where we're seeing a decline. In the sea otter case, we're seeing an increase in potential shark bites because we're seeing an increase in great white sharks in the area. And that is a conservation. That's a conservation story. It's a positive conservation story. Great whites along the west coast of North America, especially the U.S. Southern California was their nursery area. They were protected. Fish are protected with the Magnuson-Stevens Act. Sea lions are protected with the Marine Mammal Act. And so and the Marine Mammal Commission. And so over time, we've seen an increase in the abundance of great white sharks. With that, there's been an increase in the distribution. So obviously, great white sharks can't all be in the same area as they grow in abundance. So they've extended their population northward. And so they've gone up into the Santa Cruz area, into the Monterey Bay area, and they have an established population up in that area where you can see them quite frequently, apparently, or they're in there quite frequently. Now, that central coast is where these sea otters are as well. So you're seeing some predation happening, and so that is obviously a concern. And so that's going to affect the numbers, as not affecting them significantly, but affecting them enough not to get delisted. And let's talk about delisting for a second. When an animal is on the endangered species list, this animal is threatened under the Endangered Species Act and designated as depleted under the Marine Mammal Protection Act, according to the protection status on the Marine Mammal Commission website. We don't want to delist too quickly any animal that's on the endangered species list. Up here, it's the species at risk list in Canada. But you never want to take them off prematurely. You never want to, as soon as they hit those numbers, take it off. A lot of scientists, a lot of conservationists and practitioners are very wary. They're very conservative when we delist a species off of the Endangered Species Act or Species at Risk Act, depending on what country you're in. That's because those populations can turn at any point in time, right? A population of 3,090 over 3 years can decrease. And if it decreases, it's really hard to get those animals back on the list unless it's stipulated in some sort of regulation, which I don't know for a fact. So, when you say, hey, we got 3-year average, it's above 3,090, that population can dip. Let's take it for an example. Let's take the manatee population in Florida. They were doing really well until recently, and then all of a sudden, with a number of years of bad algae blooms and some red tides, year after year after year, we've seen a decrease in the seagrass population, which has caused a decrease in the manatee population. And so now we're seeing manatees die off, and researchers are concerned. Now, they've been delisted from the Endangered Species Act during the Trump administration. Right? They want to take them off so they can do development faster, because apparently you couldn't do development that quickly because, there's an endangered species in the area, and you had to, that was being affected by boat kills and boat strikes, as well as now food, right? There's not enough food because of algal blooms that smother the seagrasses. So to put that animal back on the list can be very difficult. Right? It should be easy because, there should be a stipulation in the regulations of endangered species, like maybe a few years after it's delisted, to find out how you can put it back on, or to put it back on the list easily, just in case that population dips. But their population is decreasing, and we don't know how to control it. We don't know how to bring it back because their food source is dying because of bad water quality and climate change with heated sea surface temperatures. And I'm assuming the hurricanes are not helping, right? When you get damage from hurricanes every year, and maybe the seagrasses don't grow as fast, especially when there's such a cumulative effect of different things that are bothering them and that are affecting that population. But getting back to the southern sea otter, this is something, that's a concern in terms of their population, seeing that decrease. It's not overly concerning, but it's something that is we have to be careful. Some of the threats are availability of prey. So sea urchins is huge. A lot of crustaceans and mollusks they'll eat. Entanglement in commercial fishing gear, oil spills, contaminants, disease, and shark predation. Those are the threats that they face. So a lot of natural and human related threats. But they're heavily monitored. The sea otter that went on the surfboard this past couple of weeks, and I'm not sure if it's still doing it, but definitely on July 9th there were a couple of articles that were published. A friend of mine and my co-host on the Beyond Jaws podcast, of all places, was also asked by ABC and I believe CBS to comment on this sort of matter. Now, essentially what happens when you're looking at something that is monitored as closely as these sea otters, they have numbers. The Monterey Bay Aquarium programs for sea otters are very good research, very good monitoring. And so they watch these animals quite often. They know these animals quite often. And I'm working on trying to get someone from the Monterey Bay Aquarium, even some from the surfing community, to come on and just start discussing what they do from there. But I think this is something that is is going to be good in the future to look at, to start saying, hey, we have to be careful. There are signs posted now saying aggressive sea otter in the area. Now, what was told in the newsrooms that were coming out, the news reports, was that Monterey Bay Aquarium was going to capture the animal, bring it in, do a health check, and then relocate it somewhere else. Doesn't necessarily mean it's not going to be aggressive towards surfboards again. And it doesn't necessarily mean that it's being aggressive towards surfers. It didn't look like it was going after the surfer from the video that I saw. I'm not a sea otter expert, but it was definitely going after the board. And so who knows why it is. We've seen sea lions hop up on surfboards. We've seen sea lions hop up on kayaks for warmth, because especially sea lion pups, they don't have the fat reserve to stay warm in the cool waters of off the coast of California. So oftentimes you'll see them pop up on a kayak, pop up on a surfboard, and just kind of hang out. They're not aggressive. They're not biting the surfboard. Surfers and sea kayakers that are in those areas are familiar with it, and there have been some pretty cool videos out of that. So we've known marine mammals to do that. Some of them have been hiding. They'll come on boats, they'll come on sea kayaks, they'll come on surfboards, just not only to warm up, but also to get away from some predation. And so that's also something that happens. So maybe it was doing that at the same time. I'm not sure. It could just be this one individual. This is not something that looks like that happens quite often. But if you're going to get a bigger population of sea otters, and there's always people in the water, then you might get more interactions. I wouldn't call this necessarily an attack because it went after the surfboard. I think, I don't know exactly what it's doing, and I don't want to assume what it's doing, but luckily nobody was hurt, and the sea otter wasn't hurt in the process. So hopefully it's not swallowing the surfboard material. but I know there are companies out there that are trying to make surfboards that are eco-friendly. So hopefully surfers are buying those. But that's sort of the story right now. I thought I want to provide some information about sea otters, and I thought it was a good opportunity to discuss them, to discuss their recovery and their list on how they're listed on the Endangered Species Act. Something that is obviously concerning, but something that it's a pretty interesting story, to say the least. But I would love to hear your thoughts. Why do you think the sea otter came up on the surfboard? Do you think that's a concern? Do you think surfers and sea kayakers and anybody who's using the ocean for recreation in the area should be concerned? I would love to hear your thoughts on that. Hit me up on Instagram at How to Protect the Ocean. That's on Instagram at How to Protect the Ocean. You can just follow me and DM me. By the way, just a heads up, if people follow me on How to Protect the Ocean, I'm going to engage with you and just ask, some questions like, are you a podcast listener? Are you a listener to the podcast? Or what do you like about it? What you don't? Just to kind of get to know the audience a little bit more. So I'm always looking for that interaction. And usually I wait for people to contact me. But if you follow me, I might contact you and just be like, hey, thanks for the follow. But just wanted to know are you a listener? What do you like about the episode? If you want, you can leave us a review on a podcast app of your choice. Spotify and Apple Podcasts, I know, have reviews. It always helps people kind of gain access to what the show is like. It also helps me with feedback. I check every once in a while. And I'm okay with a 1-star or 5-star, whatever you feel it deserves. I just like to hear the feedback, to be honest. And if you want to do that privately, you can do that as well at How to Protect the Ocean. But if you like this episode and you think one of your friends and family would like it as well, please feel free to share it. All you have to do is just go to your podcast app, click the share button, copy the link, send it off, put it on your Instagram stories, put it on your TikTok stories, whatever you'd like to do. It'd be greatly appreciated. That's how we grow the show, is through your recommendations. So to your friends and family and so forth. So anyway, that's it for today's episode on the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. Thank you so much for listening. I am your host, Andrew Lewin. Have a great day. We'll talk to you next time, and happy conservation.